Welcome to the webinar, The Future of Fundraising, Impact and Engagement. For those of you who don't know me, I am Sheri Chaney Jones. I am the founder and CEO of SureImpact. SureImpact is a cloud-based platform that helps nonprofits, government, social enterprises better track, measure, and communicate their unique social impact so that they're able to tell their impact story, raise more money, and create real and lasting social change. We're very excited to have you here. You may know, but we offer a lot of different learning opportunities, educational opportunities here at SureImpact. And mostly it's been me delivering the content, but this particular webinar is so exciting because I have a friend and colleague joining us today, TJ McGovern, because I know that many of you, although you may have your impact data, you know how to measure your impact. What do you do with that? How are you going to use it? What's going on in the fundraising world? Because sustainability for nonprofits is extremely important. So I invited TJ McGovern to share with you. TJ is the founder and president of McGovern Consulting Group. He's a nonprofit coach, trainer, consultant, and speaker with 24 years of experience in development, strategic visioning, campaign management, and major gift solicitation. And I'll let him talk a little bit more about his great career, but he has a master's in nonprofit management from the Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs. And he served as the development director for the largest community college system in the nation. So he absolutely knows what he is doing. He has coached and trained numerous organizations, schools, social service agencies, and social veterans through successful fundraising efforts ranging from $100,000 to $200 million. And he's trained leaders from all over 200 organizations on how to use engagement processes to maximize funding opportunities. So you are all in for an amazing treat. With that, I'm going to turn it over to, oh wait, we got a poll first, and then I'm going to turn it over to TJ. Sorry. So we do want to know about your poll. I need to launch this poll because I'm going to do that. There we go. Launch the poll, but from calendar year comparison, 2021 to 2022, did your fundraising go up, down, or stay the same? So let's see what happens. Okay, wow, this is good data. I love data, as everyone knows. Good polls make me happy. All right, looks like you had a good year. Give it a couple more seconds here. Get your answers in. Up, down, stayed the same. So far, we're getting, it looks like people had a decent year from calendar years. So we've got 42% so far have said they went up, 23% said it went down, and 35% said it stayed the same. Interesting. All right, so I am going to, now I will turn it over to you, TJ.
Thank you for that great introduction. Really excited to share this material. And it comes from a place of being in the field weekly with clients, engaging their own constituents. So before I jump into the material, I feel like our landscape, philanthropic landscape, is at a crossroads, kind of like when Blockbuster was the entertainment of choice, you know, with VHS or DVDs and those kinds of things. And then this small company called Netflix came along, and we all know how that changed. Blockbuster is out of business and Netflix continues to be on the cutting edge of entertainment. So I feel like the nonprofit sector is at that crossroads as well. There's a clinging to old ways that are not working because the philanthropic environment has really changed. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So times are changing. And what do I mean by that? There are a few total donors, and I'll quantify that here in a couple slides, but overall, we have less donors giving more money. You know, if you could kind of think of an arrow, so less donors, you know, going down, and then dollars are up, donors down, dollars up, as colleagues say. So what does that mean for your organization, and what can you do about it? There are fewer committed donors. I think the donor situation or investor, I use those terms interchangeably, has changed. And what do I mean by that? That they're more in charge and they're being more judicious, and they're looking for organizations where they can be heard and understood and realize societal goals that they have. There are less frequent donations. People are giving less. And, we all know that data. If you have some time, I would invite you to check out the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, where I draw a lot of these conclusions, plus my own weekly, monthly, yearly interaction with clients, investors, and aging donor pools. We have folks that are in the mid 40s that were the core of the campaigns in the 90s, and now they're waiting until their 60s, mid 60s to be precise, to make a gift. So that's kind of the whole what's going on. If there's something, that two big takeaways I want to say here at the beginning that I want to share with you. It's not so much about what you solicit, because the ask is not a singular event. It's what you elicit. By being immensely curious, discovering what I like to call animating passions around what their goals are, and what that mindset, or said in a different way, they're not your donors, you're one of their charities. They're not your donors, you're one of their charities. So next slide. So that shrinking donor segment, let's quantify that for a moment. 30% decline in the number of middle-aged donors over the past 20 years. Why is that happening? Because I think the old ways are not working. I have a dear friend of mine here in Indianapolis. She is 87. She's a whippersnapper, totally with it, a sharp mind. She had a university that shall remain nameless, where a gift officer showed up at her house and wanted her to sign a gift agreement after the first visit. And she was really uncomfortable and shared her dismay and anger around that. So she's 87. You get my point there. The same committed donors who made that growth possible is in the 90s, they're just aging out. So, in 1980, the average number of years before becoming a committed donor was 7, and the median age is about 45. And now, in the last couple of years, the average age of donors, 20 years of giving prior, and the median age is 62. How, with this awareness, how are you adapting your strategies and engagement with these aging pools? So the organizational approach to fundraising is that if I can encapsulate it in a really somewhat humorous way, I see a lot on the transactional side. What I mean by that, emails, direct mail, it's just spray and pray. And I see a lot of organizations just, sending out emails and sending direct mail pieces. And, the privilege I have of talking to investors, donors, of clients, they often say to me, I get all this direct mail from this organization that I love. However, I just don't even open it, and I throw it in the garbage. So over time with clients, what I like to do is figure out a communication strategy and frequency, and ask your own donors, investors, how often they want to be communicated, and actually do it. I was with a client here in Indianapolis last week, and this couple, big investors to this organization, said, I love, and they instituted that strategy where they asked their constituents how often they want to be communicated, and they actually did it. With all the technology we have at our fingertips, it does take a little time to figure all that out and make sure it's implemented. But when you do, I can say from experience, your donor retention rate and just your happiness that your investors have when you actually listen to them and actually do that goes up. That story about these big investors with the client, the gentleman said, I love this organization because they only ask me twice a year. Everyone else, it seems like I get a direct mail piece I don't even open, I throw in the garbage. They implemented that strategy, and he increased his gift. So it's about listening and then taking action what your investors and donors want. So over soliciting and insisting on unrestricted gift are why 65% of donors who make a first gift never make a second. Often with clients, I analyze their anonymous donor data, and I take a look not only at their overall donor retention rate, but I look at their first-time donor retention rate. And the national average, depending on what organization you follow, it's 18, 19%. So that's saying out of 100 donors that give you a first gift, only 19 are coming back. So a little takeaway from today: pay attention to someone that makes a first-time gift to you and really make a big deal out of it. What I do, clients know this, every year in December, I pick out 10 nonprofits totally by random that don't know who I am and what I do for a living. And I make a small nominal gift to each of these 10. And I am often disappointed and somewhat surprised once in a while when I get a call from either the executive director or the director of development, if they have the staff to have that other position. And they call me and say, well, thank you for making the first time gift. What is it about us that made you make that decision? And then, of course, I tell them who I am and what I do. But 95% of the time, it is often an impersonal email that is not even personalized, and I don't even get a direct mail piece thanking me for my gift. So make sure you pay attention to those first-time givers. So 90% who start giving are gone within 5 subsequent appeals. So before you ask again, via email or direct mail or another vehicle, text to give, I would invite you to have the discipline to make sure that you report on what you did with their gift before asking again. So the way to think about that is ask, thank, report, repeat. Most organizations fall down on that report piece and over solicit, and you get the numbers that we have. So fundraisers, spending time in higher education, serving college presidents, I know firsthand the pressure that fundraisers are under pressure to ask too often and not really realizing, acknowledging, discovering, what those animating passions are. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. And I'll get into a few of them. We could spend a whole day on what that looks like. So fundraisers talk in general rather than the specific terms of what happens with the money that donors give. So another little takeaway is show, don't tell. You can do that in a variety of ways. A picture of those served in your nonprofit, what that looks like with the communication vehicle. Because of you, we're able to do this. That can also be when you go visit with your own donors, investors, bringing someone that was impacted by their philanthropic gift. Unfortunately, the old way is beating people into philanthropic submission, and I'm seeing that does not work. As some of that data and my weekly experience, that you have to really understand the consideration continuum, C squared, as I like to say, what that looks like, and really discovering it, because people are taking longer to make larger gifts. Next slide, please. So if you're bored on a Friday night and you'd love to read a book, she's written 2 of them, and it covers everything from content and newsletters to how often you should ask, backed with data. And I know, Sheri is a big fan of data like myself. It really will help you inform of what that looks like, in terms of frequency, those kinds of things. So most fundraisers could make more if top decision makers had a better grasp of donor motivation and strategic alternatives to bombarding donors with frantic appeals. Frantic appeals, in my experience and from observing the data that, again, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, if you Google that, all this data is there, that works for natural disasters. The frantic appeals about, Red Cross, that kind of thing. So if you pay nothing attention and convince your bosses, whatever that looks like, and this is the last slide of this presentation, pay attention to donor motivation and demotivation. That's the lens to look at that engagement. The number one reason people give to organizations of their choice is because it feels good. The same part of the brain, neuroscientists have proven this, that when you make a philanthropic gift, the same part of your brain that we are doing something you enjoy or you're around someone that you really care about gets lit up when you're doing that, for when they make a gift. So donors are hopping around the organizations that help them feel the best and report back about what you did with their money. Remember that. That's a very important awareness. Next slide, please. So yeah, you think you have some competition. This is just kind of a visual of what's going on. So there's a 25% increase in the growth of nonprofits every decade, and donors are given more choice, and with it, more comparative analysis. I'll take that a little bit deeper. They have a choice on which organization has helped them feel good about what, their gift does for those served of your organization. This kind of breaks it down. It's sobering, and you can imagine I get a call probably like once every 2 weeks. I want to start a nonprofit, and of course I direct them, and why don't you go to this organization and see if there's duplication of service. So competition is getting fierce for philanthropic dollars. So it's just good to know that and then respond accordingly. Here's what I see, and the way that I communicate this is gaps of what the organizations want and then what the donors want. So growing gaps, a strategy, as I define it, is the means by which internal aspirations are aligned with external aspirations. So, oftentimes, in my career thus far, I don't say that I'm a fundraiser, I'm a matchmaker. Meaning that I match the aspirations of the donor investor with the stated or intended impact of the organization. Let me repeat that. So I'm a matchmaker. I really discover what's important to donors, investors, and then align that with the stated or desired impact of the organization. So fundraising is really aligning those organizational capabilities with donor convictions to achieve a significant, sustainable societal impact. So, I rarely use the term fundraiser, matchmaker, and that is really what I do. Even in my years in higher education, that's what I did too. And by really, really listening. So that's so important. Next slide, please. So staying with that theme of the gaps between what we want and what donors want, investors want. So they're often getting rapid and personal means of donor acquisition, but higher rates of donor attrition, using the same strategies to retain as you did to acquire. It's a whole different mindset. Oftentimes when I'm asked by organizations to hire major gift officers, matchmakers, fundraisers, before we do that, I like to communicate to them, why don't we look at a stewardship officer to really take care of the ones that you currently have? Because years ago, the name of the game was acquisition. And now I invite you to really think about keeping the ones that you have. Retention is the name of the game. Stewardship officers really are good about that. Oftentimes, the organizations never get to know the real reason they give, as giving is becoming increasingly directed by personal values, particularly as people are in their 60s. They have some life underneath them, and they want their values, stated or not, to be manifested to your organization. So I was on the phone last week doing an interview with a very large 7-figure gift donor to an organization, and he said, TJ, the reason I love this organization is because they manifest the world the way that I would like it. I just don't have time to do it. And that's why I give them the money that I do. Remember that. So pace of fundraising and annual expectations, don't take too long, look younger, want more evidence and deeper engagement. That is the cohort that is replacing the baby boomers in that generation. They want to be really involved. And one of the takeaways, throwing a lot of nuggets at you, is that involvement begets investment. Involvement begets investment. So spend that time to really get them involved and co-create a philanthropic objective that they can, realize the world through your organization. A major gift sometimes requires 7 to 9 interactions over 21 months. So taking that long view is a strategy that will serve you well. So what organizations want? Culture of philanthropy. I imagine this is probably some of the vocabulary in your own organization. They want major gifts, they want endowment, they want loyal followings, very impressive buildings, reputation to be admired, unquestioning trust, of course, attending at events, captive audience, and giving as a precondition for engagement. That's what organizations want. Here's how the way I'm summing up what I find donors, investors want. A culture of accountability, that you're actually going to take their philanthropic gift and do what you agreed on. Major impacts, adaptation to change, keeping your promises, adaptive structures that facilitate human performance, relevance, really to be heard, proof of trustworthiness, substantive engagement. You're going to need to spend some time. Participate, in problem solving. Engagement as a precondition for giving, and versus what the org wants, or giving as a precondition. So a few additional thoughts on this. These changing philanthropic attitudes, giving is not a reward of what you've done, it's an investment in what you propose to do. Projected return on investment that's significant and sustainable. Donors or investors will respond better if you ask them to give through your organization rather than merely to it. Philanthropy commands more than charity. Philanthropy commands more than charity. And organizational needs calls organizational viability into question. So very, very important. Donors are less trustworthy. I mean, you look at in institutions, in government, and all the things that we've taken for granted, they have become more determined to act on personal values. So I would really invite you to discover what those personal values are, and convictions that are most important lessons they believe life has to have offered them or taught them. It just kind of sum up in a somewhat a humorous ways. Changing philanthropic attitudes. As those donors have become less trustworthy, they become more determined to act on the personal values, convictions. And so motivation for giving, I have a personal connection. Some of these are verbatim from donors, investors I talked to. My brother is gay and I feel he should have every equal right. I do. The goal is there is a change in the laws at the federal level that are permanent. Motivation for giving, he speaks to what is important to me. The planet right now has a lot of issues in terms of the environment. If I can donate a little bit to a project that I can get behind, it makes me feel good. Remember that, that's why they give. It activates a part of the brain that makes them feel good. There's a clear need. Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, it's super scary and affects a lot of kids, and there's just no money being put into research. As verbatim from a very large donor to the organization. And then I can see the impact. So another little nugget: show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. Show them what their dollars did. And then put a story behind that. Story for me is how you organize the facts, or Sheri and SureImpact, that impact data coupled with a great story makes a full engagement in my experience. So what does work in terms of these changing philanthropic attitudes? Again, I could spend all day on this, but a few little nuggets. A prospectus in which you identify an unmet need or an emerging opportunity in the community, workplace, or larger society. Describe the specific competencies that your organization possesses that will allow it to rise to the challenge. Current impact, more how, less wow. More how, less wow. Or said another way, investors are wanting low gloss, high content. all my years in higher ed, it drove me crazy. We'd spend 22 months creating a great case for support with a lot of slick presentations, and then no one really read it. And I just thought that was just a colossal waste of time and money. So when I co-create deliverables with clients, it's that low gloss, high content that fosters that deliberate dialogue. And then lastly, describe what level private support will allow you to build on that competency to have a greater impact with the projected societal return on investment. Next slide. So this is my attempt at what we were doing, kind of going back to that beginning example of Blockbuster, and then when Netflix came along and how that changed the whole industry. So the fundraising model of the past, it's all about the organization, the institutional needs, their objectives, their progress, gift stewardship, pledge fulfillment, and institutional planning. So I like to call it the purpose-driven model of the future. Portals of purpose. That was language that I received from an investor, that portals of purpose. They said this organization is a portal of purpose because of his story and involvement with his parents giving this organization. That just came to me and it was just beautifully put. Outcome-oriented initiatives, progress to outcomes, impact stewardship, initiative refinement, and greater impact projection. All of what social impact measurement will help you even communicate even better. This is what, on the right side of the screen, this is what donors, investors are wanting. Less and less on the left. That's just, again, from that daily experience. So a couple things that, what you can do. And I'm just going to give you a few here in the essence of time. I really invite you to be immensely curious about your own donors. You can do a survey. You can go spend time with them and ask them questions like, why did you first give to our organization? Or how does our stewardship compare to other organizations that you give? What's your most memorable philanthropic experience and what we can learn from it? When I bring that kind of questioning with clients to their own investors, how many times have I heard, these are great questions. I wish more people, more of my charities of choice ask me. So that immensely curious, and be really clear that you're not there to ambush them for money, that you really want to discover why they're choosing your organization. Works tremendously, really, really well. So donors are much more apt to open up to those they believe are responsible for institutional accountability, donor relations, and stewardship. Most feel sufficiently thanked, but underinformed as the impact of their giving. So go back to that. Ask, thank, report. Most organizations fall down on the report. I invite you to be disciplined to report before you ask again. A little bit more about some listening exercises, listening opportunities that you can choose to deploy. I often, when a new president or executive director comes into an organization, I invite them to go on a listening tour, 100 days of listening, to really listen to past board members, current board members, lapsed donors, current donors, those kinds of things. And they can develop their strategy going forward. And oftentimes there's a reconsideration of the direction and the purpose of the organization. And by showing that you're willing to listen, you foster that deliberate dialogue. What do I mean by deliberate dialogue? It's like a great tennis match, back and forth. It's just not the fundraiser doing all the talking and beating people into philanthropic submission. So where most of your new dollars will come from, it's not from new donors, but learning something new about the donors you thought you already knew. I'll repeat that because it's just reaffirming everything I'm trying to share with you in our allotted time. Your new dollars will come not from new donors. So again, focus on retention, but learning something new about the donors you thought you already knew. and that's by asking questions. So the most important listening opportunities with individual donors, investors are shortly after giving. Why? What were the triggers, memories, values, source of appreciation, hopes, expectations? This means a more personalized stewardship, as in the right there, impact stewardship. So I'll just leave that there because I could keep going on about that for a long time. So trends, a prospectus in which you identify an unmet need, emergency opportunity. Describe your org's competencies. I'm repeating, but this is something I really want you to take away. Current impact, more how, less wow, low content, low gloss, high content is what investors are wanting, and describe what level of private support will allow you to build on that competency. Projected a societal return on investment. Because of this investment, we will able to do X, Y, Z. Serve more, expand into new, community, offer more scholarships, whatever the impact of your organization is. So very important. And watch the dialogue change if you take this mindset. Next slide, please. So 6 thoughts that never occur to your donors, investors. I can't wait for the public phase of that campaign so I can finally give. I'm finding that, the feasibility study, some of you might know what that is. I'm often called to do those. However, I just find that people are getting tired of that they're coming away with the awareness that organization already made up their mind, and they didn't really ask my opinion early on, and we couldn't co-create a possible solution to the societal need, whether that be a building, expansion of programming, that kind of thing. 2, I think we should give $25,000 to fill in one of those slots on their donor pyramid that is used to work in the past, that though that is part of a deliberate dialogue or an engagement, that oftentimes really does not meet the aspirations of the investor. I had no interest in giving until they redesign their logo. I find that, investors that have substantial propensity to give, they don't really care. I'm not going to give them a cent to give up a stronger social media presence. Please don't read that I'm not saying that's important, but I invite you to go deeper with qualified prospects. Qualified prospects meaning they have an interest and capacity to make a significant gift to your organization. Number 5, I hope they ask me for a gift far larger than my capacity to give. That is, often over time, visiting, discovering, asking questions. And over time, as they begin to trust you, they'll reveal what their capacity is. And my experience, I'm weird this way, but I've been on over 1,200 plus visits with qualified prospects. They already kind of know what they want to do. They're looking to the organization to help them clarify how can they make the biggest impact. I'm ready to give if they ask me just one more time. Again, over solicitation is really hurting or the philanthropic sector and spirit, and really being intentional and curious and having that deliberate dialogue is so important. Next slide.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I was taking all of these notes. There's so much great nuggets in here. So let's talk about one of my favorite things that TJ is talking about is the shift, the old model versus the new model, and how this purpose-driven organization is where it's at. Words, these are words, and I did not ask him to write these words. They're words that just speak to my heart. Progress to outcomes, impact stewardships, portal as a purpose, outcome-oriented initiatives. These are really cool, exciting times, I think, for nonprofit sectors. But let's take a poll. So we heard a lot about how, not a pool, but a poll. We heard a lot about how important it is for donors, investors to hear about the impact and I love the show don't tell kind of mentality. So for those on our webinar today, I'm just curious in the chat, when you're going to an investor donor pitch or making an appeal, do you regularly pull impact data in? Just type it in the chat. Laverne says yes. I know Laverne does. I know Homeport well. They're great with their data. Darren says yes. Good, good. Oh, yep. Safe Harbor says yes. Awesome. Well, I think we attract a data-driven crowd here, TJ.
Yes.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, so far we've got a lot of people. Yes, they bring in impact data. That is amazing. Good. I'm super excited to hear how you're using it. So let's dig a little bit deeper into, oh no. Let's go back. Let's go back and talk a little bit about how to further bring in your impact story, bring in your impact data so that you can be this purpose-driven organization, this purpose-driven nonprofit. I know TJ and I, we've had a lot of conversations over the last year and just trends that we're seeing in fundraising, and this trend around being ready for these large gifts that we're seeing happening in the world. But one of the things that I've been saying for years, and I stole this from a philanthropist, Mario Moreno, who is the kind of the person behind the Leap of Reason movement and wrote Leap of Reason back in, I think, 2011, maybe. He says, you know, forget your funders and do it for yourselves when talking about collecting and reporting impact measurement data. There's a lot of reasons why to do that, because it demonstrates that you're a purpose-driven organization. Donors will see through the anecdote or the story or the haphazard, like, oh, they're asking us for information, I better pull something together, right? It's building that purpose-driven organization first. It's not because your funders want it. And TJ's done an amazing job telling us about the trends in philanthropy and how important it is to be able to talk about and report on our impact and what we've done with those dollars and how we've been good social return on investment with the dollars that they've invested in us. But it's also, we need to make sure that we can demonstrate that we are a purpose-driven organization, right? I mean, you know, when your kids, you see your kids just clean the room because they want to go to their friend's house versus, you know, if your kid woke up every single morning and picked stuff off their floor and made their bed, which one do you want to reward more, right? So the same thing, get your organization in order so that you have this information at your fingertips. Again, going back to this purpose-driven model, what do we need to do? So before we can become a purpose-driven model of these organizations, how can we participate? How can we be this type of organization? You have to collect outcomes and impact data. We talk to organizations all the time because they are excited about the dashboards that SureImpact can provide, and they're excited about having this information at their fingertips. And when we meet with the leadership, we say, yes, we can provide you those insights. However, you have to collect the data. You have to make data as part of your culture where you're regularly recording and reporting what you're doing, how well you're doing it, and how people are better off. So I just want to, this has been so helpful. And we're going to get to Q&A in a minute. I know I have some questions. I've seen some questions in the chat, but if any of our listeners are thinking to themselves, this is all great stuff, and I hear you, that I want to be a purpose-driven organization. I want to be on the leading edge of where donors are. I wrote down, TJ, that the newer donors, they want more evidence and they want more engagement. And how are we going to be ready for this next generation of donors? And especially, you know, and you even talked about the donors in their 60s who want to give through our nonprofit, right? They want to feel like their donor investment is moving the needle as well. So what do you need to do to get ready as a nonprofit and to have those stories, to be able to report out before you ask again? Well, first you need to, depending, it's a journey, right? You may be somewhere on this scale, but first thing you have to just determine, why do you do what you do? When you talk about those stories of motivation and wanting to have stories of impact, it's really important that we as a nonprofit can share what is our purpose. Don't chase the dollars. Don't try to be something you're not to funders. Be very firm in what you are. Actually, just this morning, I was at an event with the CEO of COSI, which is one of the best, it is the best #1 science museum in the country. And he was talking about the key to their success was knowing who they are, knowing their identity, right? So what is your nonprofit? What do you do? Why do you do it? That becomes your outcomes. That is what you will measure. That's what you want to report on. That's why people get excited to see you. And I know we have some friends on the call here. So when I think about, I've got Trish with disaster recovery in Florida. She knows that her impact is making sure that we're ready for disaster preparedness and that the people who they serve are getting the resources to be stably housed. We've got a friend from Safe Harbor here, right? She is able to tell the story of how she's helping people with peer support and meeting their needs. We've got Homeport, who keeps people stably housed and can talk about how their supportive services help them, right? They can clearly tell their story with data. So once you know what you do, then think about how are you going to collect this impact? What data, what tools, what resources are you going to use to manage your impact, to have that data at your fingertips? You also are going to need to talk to your whole staff, not just your development team, but your program staff about how important it is and understanding how to collect data, how to use these new tools, because you'll need to tell your impact story with these data. So we have to have our staff help us collect it so that we have the data to tell our story. And it's not until we get to that section and that level of detail that we can start to validate our impact, meaning prove how well we are at delivering our mission and how we will increase it and scale it into the future to share our impact story. So those are kind of the pieces to getting to a purpose-driven organization so we can be ready for the future of fundraising, which is very exciting. If you are on this webinar and haven't yet downloaded our free guide on SureImpact site, expanding your social impact, I ask you to do that. We outline all the steps it takes to help you get to that purpose-driven organization to be able to tell your impact story in the different stages and what you need to do along the way. And we're happy to help you do that. But I am going to bring it back to you, TJ, because I know we've had some questions. I want to be able to give audience time to have some questions. I want to have just a chat with you because you have so much great stuff. Like I was writing down so much stuff. The importance of a culture of accountability, give through your organization. Someone did ask a question that I noticed that talked about they serve children and young people, and so there's privacy concerns, like showing a picture of the children just wouldn't be appropriate. So what are some good ways you've seen nonprofits be able to show their work beyond just maybe photographs of what they've done?
So a great question. So the integrity and protection of kids is vitally important. And the individual, I wrote a white paper on that. And if the individual that asked that question, I'd be happy to share that with her and how to do that with integrity without violating the safety of the kids. It's kind of a process, but it can be done. And so, it would take me like 15, 20 minutes to explain it. So
Sure.
if she's willing to email me, I'd be happy to share that solution with her.
Okay, great. That would be great. If anyone else has any questions for TJ, please put them in the chat. That would be great. Yeah, go ahead.
This last slide, and I kind of began with this, that if you pay attention, nothing more than donor motivation and demotivation, you'll be quantumly ahead than 95% of the other nonprofits out there. And I recommend this book, and a tip of the hat to Jim Langley, a dear friend and colleague that started this conversation 7 or 8 years ago. And that was matching my daily experience. And so if, again, you're bored on a Friday night and want to take this presentation material on steroids, I highly recommend The Future of Fundraising by Jim Langley. It's an outstanding book that will really answer and take this into much more in depth than this presentation could do because of time limits.
That's awesome. Yeah, the donor motivation and I think for me, one of the biggest ahas that you shared was this concept of giving through your nonprofit and to your nonprofit. Like that was one of the big key takeaways I had. And is that related then to donor motivation And if so, how?
Yeah, so that like that little story I shared where I was talking to a donor to an organization, they were out west, and he was a 7-figure giver to this organization, and he said, this organization, it was environmental, is manifesting the world the way that I would love to. I just don't have the time. That's why I give him a ton of money to do it. So that organization he was giving money through to protect a lot of land out west. And so that's the mindset to take, that your organization is a vehicle for change, in alignment with the animating passions of those that are investing in it, whether it be $25 or 25 million. It's the same mindset.
That's awesome. Let's see, what else do we have going on here in the chat? Tina says, how do you determine which data is best to collect, share? So I'll answer this from my perspective, TJ, but I'd love to have your take on it too, from an ask and a fundraising perspective. I can talk about the collecting, you can talk about the sharing. So,
Okay.
So when I think about collecting, again, I went back to that, why does your organization do what it does, right? So you mentioned a nonprofit that protects land in Montana. Maybe you're here to help children that are experiencing homelessness, or educate children, right? Thinking about the whys of your organization, those whys can be translated into outcomes. And so we talk about the 3 types of data that you need to collect. You need to talk about, obviously, who you serve and the makeup of those people, certain demographic characteristics about them, what services that do you provide and in what quantity, and then how do those services generate those changes, and quantifying that in terms of achieving those outcomes. Because when you can talk about that and the outcomes that you can achieve, then your donors that are interested in that purpose-driven donations or investment into your social causes, you're helping them see how their resources do create those really positive outcomes in your community. And I don't know if you have other things to add there, TJ.
Well, the organizations that have worked with that have gone through the process of collecting social impact data are quantumly farther ahead in engagement. So there's one thing to say that, we've moved the needle on XYZ, but then to show the rigorous process of how they arrived at that awareness, and that builds that trust and credibility and accountability that newer and the changing philanthropic landscape. So, story's still important, and it's how you organize the facts. And by doing social impact measurement, having that rigorous process really makes it full engagement, and it just lends for credibility. So that's how I would answer that.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? I'm just curious with these younger donors. We hear a lot about your millennials and how are you experiencing them to be different than maybe their parents when it comes to giving?
They're taking the mindset of like you would watch a stock. They're really wanting to get into the details and asking for more information than their parents ever dreamed of. From financial to social impact measurement to I had a client where a younger generation from a family foundation wanted to talk to some of the people that this organization was serving with special needs, and not only talk to the participants in the programming, but their parents or guardians or whatever that looked like. And it changed the whole conversation. Their parents never asked for that. They just gave because that was, just part of their ethos.
Yeah.
But the generation is wanting a more of a holistic 360 view before they make an investment.
That's really interesting, kind of watching the nonprofits like they would stocks. Darren did have a question about, can you talk briefly on what demotivates a donor?
Oh gosh, asking for a gift on the first visit. Sending them a bunch of mail that they really never requested, committing to something that you're going to do and then not doing it, over soliciting them, via email, phone calls, that kind of thing, without that genuine desire to really discover and be unique
Yeah.
with their animating passions. I could go on, but those are the top ones.
Those are some of the things. So the day of, remember back in the day, and I remember watching my grandfather do this when we used to get the address labels in the mail from the charities.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't ask for these, but my grandfather would write a check because they sent him something. Are those days over?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, there's still a subsector of that. They call those premiums, direct mail business. So, yeah, there's some donors that want it, but here's the thing: it takes a lot of work, but go through the effort to really discover what their communication preferences are. If they want to be invited to everything, or they want to be, direct mailed once a month. But if you ask them what they want to do and then give them a choice and then actually do it, I can say with utmost confidence, it's rare for a consultant to say that things will change. Your dollars in will go up, retention will go up, first time donor retention, all these things, will change. Ask them.
And I have another question that came through as well.
Yeah.
So, what are some more of the questions you should ask donors to learn about their motivation for giving?
Oh, here, let me give me 1 second and I can pull that up here. I have yeah, here we go. 1 second. Here's standard ones that I use all the time. And I'll kind of go through slow if you want to write them down. How can we be better stewards of your giving? How can we better demonstrate the impact of your giving? It's one of my favorites. I ask all the time. How does our stewardship compare to other organizations to which you have given? How does our stewardship compare to other organizations to which you have given? What has been your most satisfying giving experience and what can we learn from it? Oh, that's another favorite to ask because they'll give you the roadmap of how they want to be engaged. On some version I hear, oh gosh, don't mail me every month, or don't, e-blast me every week, those kinds of things. This is another favorite because it speaks to unmet need or unmet aspiration. Is there anything you would like us to aspire to that we have not? Is there anything you would like us to aspire to that we have not? A couple more. What about us has stood the test of time? A great question to ask. It's at the right altitude, in my opinion. What about us has stood the test of time? And then lastly, as you reflect on the service we provide, what has become passé or outdated? That question, in my experience dealing with clients, investors, has launched more programs than I'd like to admit, because they then disclose they're really excited about XYZ type of programming for those served. And then, a proposal about a prototype, and then the conversation happens. So is that, I'll stop. I can keep. Okay.
Those are great. Wow. Well, TJ, I'm sure everyone is sitting here thinking, I need to learn more from him. I want to go deeper. How best can our listeners engage with you further?
Oh, thank you. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm very studious and responsive to LinkedIn messages, or I see my emails in the chat here on this webinar, or just visit my website. There's a contact me, and I'll be sure to reach out.
Awesome. Wonderful. And SureImpact, we want to continue the conversation related to, we just heard from TJ and the great trends that we're seeing with individual donors and investors. We also want to invite you next month, March 22nd. We will be inviting another grant writing consultant to be talking about the future of grant funding and the trends that we are seeing in the grant funding space. So we hope to see you there. There'll be more information to sign up. You can always learn more at SureImpact.com. So thank you so much, TJ, for your time. It's been such a
It's a
pleasure.
pleasure, a lot of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful day.